and the Greeks is about 1,000 years missing. It's called the Dark Ages, right? Dark Ages. You know, nothing's happened in the world. And then sometimes it's called medieval ages, sometimes it's called Middle Ages. Middle is between what? Between two countries, or is it between two what? Well, you know, what they actually mean, and our mind tells us it's between two durations of time. From the Greek as one, you know, which is European civilization, and modern civilization, which is also European civilization. So that is actually what the meaning is. But nobody seemed to want to know what was it that during that period that was going on. You can't have humanity suddenly goes to sleep and they switch their minds off. No inventions, no science, no knowledge. You can't have for 1,000 years. This is an insult to humanity. Because we human beings, we are creative in our nature, you know, by nature. We invent things. We solve problems. Every day we have a problem, and when we find a solution, that is an invention. Right? So it's not acceptable. This kind of history is untenable, and it is not sustainable, and it must change. And people in the West are beginning to change it. And I hope that people in the Muslim world, they should take a lead in changing and enriching their syllabus by making this sort of so why is it that therefore it's important? Because it causes a big problem. The problem is, if you are brought up in in Europe and you are a European, you develop a sense of superiority complex. You feel that you are superior more than other people, and this superiority feeling gives you sort of an attitude which makes it easy to dominate others. The problem is, the others, when they also read the same books and find there was nobody mentioned in physics or chemistry or biology or you name the subject, whether it is in the schools or in the university, that comes from these parts of the world. And therefore they develop an inferiority complex. And when they behave as inferior, it encourages the superior to feel more superior, right? And the more superior they are, and the way they speak with you, the more inferior you become. And this business of psychological domination is a huge problem in the world. And it can cause frustrations, can cause wars, it can cause extremism, it can cause all sorts of things, because it's imbalance. And therefore, many people identify with the objectives of this mission, and we refer to it as a noble mission. What they really would like to see is that the history of every subject should be appearing like this. What you have is, the earlier civilizations before the Greeks, right? Egyptian civilization, Mesopotamia, all those great civilizations before. It's humanity. We are all in one family in this one globe which we call Earth, one planet. And then you carry on, Persians, Romans, Greek, Chinese, Indian, and then Muslim civilization. And then after that, we have the Renaissance in Europe, which was asleep. Europe was asleep for 1,000 years, but not the world, right? Europe was. And then they get triggered and wake up, and then you have the Industrial Revolution, and then you have modern day civilization. So that is, I think, you agree with me, is tenable history. And you can get many examples. You can populate this period by many names of great scientists, great technologists, great thinkers from different parts of the world. If we just take the Muslim world, and when we picked up in random some of them who are, in about 600 names. Now, you can't read them deliberately because they always question them, but just to show you the crowd. Each one of those could well be elected as a fellow of the Royal Society in London if he or she was alive, right? That's how great these people were. And some of them would be also elected to be Nobel Prize winners. They become Nobel laureates. And some of them, I'm going to expand this, some of them even very, very much more conspicuous and powerful. And they include ladies as well. They also include non-Muslims as well, and they worked quite nicely together. Now, I'd like to give you something which will entertain you. And I show you that in this work that we have done, I'll show you what is in the content of what we mean by 1001 inventions. And I'll also try to link some of the things that you may have in connection with modern day technology and science, but you're not aware of it in Oman, all right? Now, but what do we mean by 1000 inventions? What we mean by 1000 inventions is ألف اختراع واختراع. This is meant, it was deliberately, the name was deliberately chosen so that it can hit at the model, at the mental model of a typical Westerner who have been brought up in that superiority feeling, without them deliberately feeling superior, but because it's subliminal. And subliminally, when they see people like me, or like many of our great bearded friends in here, I see quite many of them, mashallah, or great women there who are wearing the hijab. When they see that, you know what comes into their mind straight away? The hikayat, the stories of Alf Layla wa Layla. 1001 nights. And 1001 nights is Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, Sinbad the Sailor, Flying Carpets, Aladdin and the Genie lamp, and of course with women belly dancing. And that's what they like. They enjoy looking at naked women dancing and so on. And they feel that these Arabs and these Muslims, they're having a good life. But that's the sort of thing in the back of the mind. Now, how on earth would you remove this? By just convincing, speaking of Islam, or speaking about, it's not going to work. So, hence the word 1001 inventions. It's a shock that, right, these they're inventions. They are actually inventions. And they are not just 1001 inventions. There are thousands and thousands of inventions, because human beings throughout, from China all the way to Spain during that time, they were innovative, they were inventive as well. So, and what do we mean by Muslim heritage? The word Muslim heritage, we deliberately choose that rather than choosing Muslim civilization or Islamic civilization. What we mean by Muslim heritage is what Europe has inherited from Muslims. Because in this timeline, right, the timeline that you see, if we're sitting there in Europe in the modern day society, and then you've got all this, we enjoy a lot of inventions, we take them for granted, and you look back, you find the first, in terms of timeline, the first one is the Muslim civilization. We received in Europe a lot of inventions from the Muslims, and the Muslims, they are themselves, either they have invented them themselves, or they have added on what they have received from other civilizations, right? So it's an evolving combinations, and hence we call it inheritance. We have inherited in Europe. So the Muslim heritage that's what's meant, which doesn't mean that we are actually trying to show some muscles here in this lecture, or oh, look at what the Muslims have done. That doesn't mean much, because you're doing nothing now anyway. So, it makes it very difficult. You just say, oh, well, my grandfather was great. Well, what about you? So it makes it complicated. And then if you say Islamic, the word Islam itself is frightening nowadays. So we tried to play around with this, and we therefore have chosen to say it's what we actually should say European sustainable history, or a tenable history of the world. That's what I mean. But because it just so happens that the last of the train of civilization, as it moves on the railway, when it arrived in Europe, it was actually a Muslim train, which has contained many compartments, and each wagon on the train has got loads and loads of knowledge, a treasure of knowledge. Because otherwise, without this, you would think that suddenly over 50 years, and after 1,000 years of darkness in Europe, over 50 years, suddenly everything happens. You've got maths, you've got physics, you've got chemistry, you've got philosophy. What on earth is going on? Is that, has the sky suddenly opened and everything came from nowhere? Well, it doesn't work like this. So you have to appreciate, and hence a lot of respectable non-Muslims in the United States, in England, in Germany, in France, and the exhibition is going to be in Sweden next, after leaving Washington, and it's also going to go into Malaysia at the same time. So this is really what we mean by Muslim heritage, and what we mean by now I'd like to connect what this project is about is, let us say, if we have received information and inventions from the Muslims, right, or from previous civilizations which came to us through the Muslims, then what are they? So we've divided the space around our life. Each one of us, if you're sitting in Europe, then you have, oh, in here, what spaces you have around you and every day? You have your home, that's one space. You go out, if you're a student or a university learning and so on, so you go to university, you go to school. Or you go to your office in town. So you got the town. And then you've got the market. You go and make shopping in one market. And then you go to travel around the world, you know. And then you look at the sky, you know, the astronomy and so on. Each of these spaces, what we try to do is we find out what are the inventions there are, what do we use in these spaces, and then see if they have a history and how did they come to us. So I'm going to start with something which I thought was peculiar to the young generation. Everybody loved to know about Formula One, you know, this is all cool, fastest car in the world and so on. And I discovered that the Arab youth are very excited about Formula One as well. And particularly when we were in Abu Dhabi. And I also asked about the Omanis, they also, the young people seem to have the excitement about it. Now, what has Formula One to do with Muslim heritage? Interesting, isn't it? This is the most sophisticated, most complicated modern technology. Well, the problem with, first of all, it's a car. So the car has engines. And the engines means it has cylinders, it has pistons, and it has gears, right? And it has, transfer motion from one place to another. But one of the most important things in this as an unusual car is that it's extremely fast. But if you move something fast, like the shape of a car, it will fly. So how does the Formula One fast car stay on the road without flying? That is a very important question. What they use airfoil section, which is the cross section of an aircraft wing. Aircraft wing is shaped in this way so that when the aircraft moves fast that way, the air on the top is moving faster over the curved surface, so it has less pressure than the air underneath passing through the flat surface. So therefore, the aerofoil will go up, that means the wing will go up, and it carries the aircraft with it. This is how the aircraft works. So what they did with the aerofoil section in the Formula One car is they reversed it upside down. So they have the spoilers in the front, right, and also at the back that make the wind goes faster under the car so that it is less pressure. And the faster it moves, the less pressure it has, so it sticks on the road. Now, where does the aerofoil section come from? That's an interesting question. Actually, I only learned about this recently when I saw some films by, there's a very famous program in the UK, everybody watches there, it's called Top Gear. And there are some interesting characters. A guy called Hammond is the shorter guy in this series who shows how cars work and so on. He said something which was very exciting. He said that the origin of this is to do with the Latin sail, Shira' al-Latin. And Shira' al-Latin is the triangular sail which has been invented from this part of the world. Why this is such an important sail? This sail, when the wind comes to it, it curves like an aerofoil section, so that there is a differential in the pressure from one side to the other, and it will tend to move in a certain direction. By maneuvering it, turning the boat on the one side or turning it the other side, you can move this boat, right, by moving it side by side, and the wind is coming in front of you. You can actually move zigzag and travel against the wind. So the wind is coming that way, but you are actually traveling against the wind, but by using the zigzag principle. This is the principle that Ibn Majid used when he took Vasco da Gama from the Cape Horn in South Africa to take him to India. Because if he had to wait for the wind to change from west to east, he would have had to wait for another 6 months. But by getting this kind of technology, Ibn Majid was able to maneuver the ship into that way. So you see how linkages can actually happen. So I'm very excited about that. Now the other one is the fact that this is an engine. Any car engine has got 6 cylinders. And what you have here is a 6-cylinder pump which works on the water on the river, but it uses pistons, it uses connecting rods, it uses cams, and it was designed and made, manufactured by Taqiyuddin al-Rasid, who was originally from Damascus, but when he did that, he was in Istanbul. Now, he got it, this was in the year 1550. He got it from, the ideas was earlier from Al-Jazari, who was the first to design a water-raising system which converts a rotary motion into a linear motion. And then made the first suction pump, as you see here, which is moving right and left and hence suck the water. This kind of technology was actually responsible for future generation industry. And therefore it's very exciting when you're able to get from the manuscripts, you understand what the manuscript says, understand the diagrams, understand the units, because there are no SI units in those days. You don't use centimeters and millimeters and meters in those days. It would be fitr and dhira', right, and so on. And you have to work out how that will appear on a scale. And this is why using computers, you can actually do quite a lot of... Now, there is another very important thing in the Formula One, and that it uses worm and wheel technology. And the worm and wheel technology was, in fact, as old as Banu Musa in the time of the Abbasid, in the time of Al-Ma'mun. These great 3 brothers, they were innovators, they were inventors, they were mathematicians, and so on. So there we are. I'm going to move very fast on this. The technology of tick-tock, of actually calculating time and counting time using this principle for in clocks was also discovered by and made by Taqiyuddin. I'm going to have to move very fast. This is a robot which will make people have wudu automatically. You know, you bring it in front of a guest, and then you put your hand on the beak of the ta'us, you know, the peacock, and then it will give you water intermittently, right, using this principle, which is a multiple flush, the same flush as we use in the toilets nowadays. Imagine it will flush automatically so many times, and it remembers how many times it has because it has a certain amount of water, and when you've finished your wudu, it clicks and turns around and gives you a towel, right? That was 1,000 years ago. Saving water, right? It only gives you the amount of water you need each time, so it stops when waiting for you for the next round. So I know Oman is very keen on water preservation. I don't know where this new invention has come from, but I have a feeling it's something somewhere either from Oman or from somewhere like Oman with people having the same attitude. And that is, how do you feed an animal in an area which is hot and the water is scarce? If you keep a tank open, it will evaporate. The water will evaporate before the animal comes. If you keep it closed, you have to be there to bring the animal and open it so that the animal can take some water. So there's a machine here which opens when the animal comes. It opens automatically, right? And then when the animal start to take water, the thing is that when it does that, see the water is actually moving. The way it's engineered, it makes the water level always constant, so that when the animal takes water away, the water rises again, and the next animal comes, and so on. So this is really a high respect to environment, to care for the animals, and also efficiency, so that the people can go and do some work while the feeding of the animal is taking place. Now we come to the spaces. In the book there are 7 spaces. And also these zones are in the exhibition. I hope one day it will come to Oman, where all families will enjoy it. Very exciting. And also for the tourists when they come. Because when it went to Istanbul, by the way, for 7 weeks, it was visited by 450,000 visitors. Quite many tourists, but a lot of them were young, male and female. Some of the young ladies from Turkey, they were weeping and crying, because when they saw that for the first time, they have seen how women were so much exciting in the early years of Muslim civilization, how much they have done in various fields. So let's get this book. It is in Amazon. I'm not making propaganda here because I don't get 1 real or 1 penny out of it myself. So please, right? I don't even take any money from our foundation. I have to say this because you might think, oh well, he's making money out of this book and so on. Alhamdulillah, Allah has given me more than what I need. So take the home, for example. The home zone. You wake up in the morning. What do people do? A typical English person. Right? I mean, I have lived there since 1960, so I think that I can speak with authority about what happens in English homes and English habits. You wake up in the morning, you go and brush your teeth, right? Where does the toothbrush come from? Then, of course, you use the toothpaste. Where does this toothpaste come from? And then, of course, you're using soap, toilet soap. How did this come about? Who manufactured it? Whose idea it was? Right? And then you go on and on, about various things in the house, but when you come downstairs, you drink a cup of coffee. Coffee has become so much important for people, modern people nowadays. It's the first thing they have in the morning, coffee. Well, how did coffee come from? How did it come to the UK? And of course in the United States, Europe, and so on. It will have a very interesting story if you go onto the coffee trail. Every one of those is actually, it could be a university project, or it could be a school project, to try to trace these and make them into small, very exciting projects. And you see the trail of all these subjects. And then what does one do after that? You get newspaper. You like to find out what's going on in the world. Reading is a very good habit of a lot of people in the West. So you read a newspaper. Now you're holding a piece of paper. How did this paper come from? Where does it come from? Well, of course, as we know, it has come originally manufactured in China, but it came through the Muslims into Europe. And Muslims have developed it so highly that, in fact, there's a huge difference. You cannot recognize the original Chinese paper from the Muslim manufactured paper later on, which started in Baghdad and then went to Cairo, then North Africa and to Spain and so on. And then you're still looking at the newspaper. And let me just sort of, the manufacturing of paper on the right has become a fantastic industry around the Muslim world. But while we are talking about the paper, you may want to write something on the paper or write some notes if you pick up some news and you want to write it using a fountain pen. The fountain pen was specially designed by a request of the equivalent of Sultan, the ruler of Egypt at the time of the Fatimites. He said, I want to have a pen that carries its own ink, but it is an obedient pen that will only give ink when I wish it to. All right? After 3 months, they come with designs, and this pen, not this particular one, but the modern pen, which works on the principle of capillary, it's the principle of how water comes from the root of the tree and reaches all the way up to the tree. How does the water, there is no heart pumping in the tree, right? So how does the water, do you think? How does the water go from the bottom, from the earth, from the base of the tree all the way to the top? It goes through the capillary principle, because of very fine, very small tubes, and the water climbs by itself. And this is the same principle that the first fountain pen in the world was designed. And it will only give you water and give you ink when you actually use it. Then it brings you out. If you put it down like that, it will not drop because of the surface tension on the capillary principles. A brilliant design. And then, of course, if you look at the newspaper again, if you don't have a good vision, you may be wearing spectacles. Where does spectacles come from? Right? Who designed these? And then, if you're looking at pictures, still in the newspaper, you've got cameras. Now, you've got a picture here, and they must have used a camera. Where does the camera come from? The word even camera, the word qamara, the camera, it will take you all the way to Al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham, who, in order to prove that the way we see our eyes, the way our eyes work, is not what the Greeks and others have described, which says that the eyes shine rays, invisible rays on the objects. He said, no, it is actually a light which goes on the object and it's reflected onto your eye, which is like a closed room. Al-Hujra al-Mudlima, the literal translation in Latin of Al-Hujra al-Mudlima is camera obscura. And the Arabs also began to use the word camera qamara if you want to go on a special dark place, like in an opera house, maybe. You say, I want a qamara. That means you want a place where nobody can see you with you and your family. So you can see where we're still in there. Then you switch the music on. We're still in the house. Then you hear music. Of course, how do you write the music? Some people I was introduced to by the name of Al-Kindi here. It's family Al-Kindi. I was hoping that maybe one or two of them are here. If they are here, then I'd like them to go and find out about the famous Al-Kindi, who was the founder of coding and decoding. The coding and decoding of ciphers and shifra.